today's topic is artificial intelligence in the contact center. I think a topic that is very pressing, very pertinent, and certainly very much in the news as we speak today. Delighted to welcome our speakers to the webinar today. Martin Hill-Wilson from Brain Food Consulting. Martin, you probably read more on emerging technology trends than probably any person I know. A lot of research you've put into today's presentation, I guess.
Yes, I mean it continues to move quite quickly as a topic, so there's lots to capture. And again, one of the standards I try to apply on these particular presentations is that you never see the same slide twice. So I did a presentation with the New Voice Media team just prior to Christmas time, it was, where we talked about this topic, and again, if you happen to be there on the day, apart from I think 2 slides, they're all new material for you today.
Excellent. We're also joined today by Ashley Units, the Chief Scientist for New Voice Media. And presumably, Ashley, you're looking at how you can actually make artificial intelligence into a product for customers.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's something we've got a big focus on at the moment, and hopefully you'll be seeing some product announcements from us very shortly. But it's a very hot topic at the moment, and as you say, it literally changes week by week. There's a lot of exciting developments in this area.
Indeed, and helping us make sense of it all is Tim Pickard from New Voice Media. And Tim, over what sort of timeframes do you think we're going to see more artificial intelligence emerging?
Well, I would expect to see AI in the contact center within the next probably 6 months or so in a basic form, but then moving through over time, becoming more and more sophisticated. So probably in 3 to 5 years, we'll see fairly extensive use of AI in the contact center.
Excellent. Well, we can watch today's replay. callcenterhelper.com/recorded webinars will be available shortly afterwards. If you're not already logged into our chat room, here's the address here, callcenterhelper.com/chat. Once you're in there, you can download the webinar slides. There is a lot of detail in Martin's slides, and a lot of you, I know, do like to download them, share with your management teams. And also, you can type in your tips or your questions into the part down there. We have a prize. This is a nice bottle of champagne or a box of chocolates if you prefer, which will be shipping out after the webinar. I've already shipped one out from this morning, and we'll have been announcing the results at the end, or the winning tip at the end of today's webinar. So we're asking a question in the chat room, and that is, what impact do you think artificial intelligence will have on the contact center? So if you'd like to put that into the chat room, what impact will artificial intelligence have on the contact center? And we're just going to also start off with a poll, and the poll question is, are you planning to deploy any form of artificial intelligence in your contact center over the next 12 months? So if I launch the poll there, the answers are yes, no, or yet to be decided. So if you'd just like to type that into the bot there. Martin, I don't know if you with your crystal ball, you think it's going to be a very high number or low number of the audience that will be putting in artificial intelligence.
Yes, I think it depends how people are going to look at it and recognise it. Possibly in terms of self-serve, I would say that I'd be disappointed if less than 30%. Well,
let's see if you're going to be disappointed or not. So let's put the
first prediction was fine.
Yeah, so 41% are planning to put something into the contact center in the next 6 months, 24% aren't, and we've got about a third who are waiting to see. So quite fascinating. And just the audience about what impact will artificial intelligence have on the contact center. Michael says it's inevitable. It's a matter of time. It will probably replace the functionality of IVR as a starter for 10. Adoption will follow quickly. The issue will be effective implementation and will be need to view through the employee-to-employee experience as well. Carmen believes artificial intelligence will raise the profile of contact centers, and Rovin says it will result in non-human responses with no mistakes. So I think that's a rather bold prediction. So I think that's probably the time now to pass the baton across to Martin. And Martin, if you'd like to kick off your presentation.
Sure. Thank you very much. Well, hello everybody, wherever you are on the world. This is an exploration of opportunity that we've got now as AI has turned up pretty much mainstream. What's going to happen in our space? And I do actually think, talking a little earlier with Ashley, that we may well find ourselves in customer service as being one of the earlier areas for discovery in terms of what the art of the possible is. As ever, this first section is a bit of a scene setter, explaining now why, at this particular point in time, AI has, well, its time has come, if you will. So the first one, really very briefly, is to talk about digital lifestyle. Of all the things we could say, here's one that I think resonates with the rationale for it, and that is that we've got to a situation where at least half of your potential customer base is expecting you to be available 24/7. That's a pretty strong ask, and there's certainly not many call centers that are provisioned in terms of providing more shifts during the night time. So it raises the question of how are we going to be more generally available to customers? And certainly that's reflective of the 24/7 digital universe that we're now living in. How do we deal with that? And that's one of the arguments for self-service. Again, you can see in certain kinds of brands that already the expectation is that we can continuously dialogue with the supplier, and this is a good example of Booking.com, who in fact provide a whole number of ways in which people can reach out to them. This particular example is on a messaging platform, and again the expectation is that as the customer I can communicate to you in terms of making sure that you're aware of my arrival. I can start to provision things in terms of what I want once I actually get to the hotel. Core basic expectation. In terms also of what is taking place out in the marketplace, I think one of the most important things, and one of the reasons why the language of bots has come through very strongly, particularly 2016 and this year, has been the migration from desktop and browsers across to smartphone and the messaging platforms. And again, you can see the incredible growth that we can see there. The dominant ones are 1 billion plus now in terms of participation. And indeed, it's been on top of those that we've seen the first generation of chatbots. And Facebook last year famously sort of kicked off a whole round of being able to do rapid prototyping on those particular platforms. Microsoft followed very quickly. And there's something in excess of 11,000 developers now who are pushing chatbots out onto those particular platforms. However, that's not the only thing that's going down. If that's a text-based environment, which it primarily is at the moment, we've also got a new voice interface going down. Siri is well known to us. Some of us will have started playing and experimenting with Alexa, and indeed Alexa has made overtures, well, Amazon I should say, has made overtures that they are now going to provide Alexa as another form of cloud-based customer service, so you can't ignore that. Google has decided to pitch in, and its assistant now is trying to keep pace with what Alexa's been up to, and Microsoft itself has got a pretty powerful capability in terms of Cortana. So we're now seeing new levels of engagement both on voice and also on text in an automated way, and that growth again is something that in the customer service business we can't afford to ignore. And to that extent, by the way, we can deliver services on different platforms. This particular example is a messaging-based platform, and indeed if you look at the Ofcom stats at the moment in terms of UK behaviour, we tend to split our time still almost equally now between desktop and smartphone. And I think the immediate challenge that we face in customer service is to work out how that changes the way in which we deliver service. So, you know, a larger screen, such as the one that we're all probably looking at the moment to receive this webinar, is one particular format which serves up certain opportunities and challenges, as does that smartphone, which you can see in that particular picture there. So again, we've got different platforms that we need to deliver our customer service through. And then the last thing to say, and this is probably the most relevant thing in terms of the topic, is the fact that AI has come and gone a number of times over the years. And if you're a bit of a history buff on this, you will have noticed that it came very strongly during the 70s, disappointed, didn't quite meet expectation, did the same in the 80s, and I guess you could say from the 80s up until very recently, we've augmented our interest in AI through the movies. And so we've kept up to speed with it, but it's been fantasy rather than reality. And behind the scenes, there's been a whole number of rapid developments. And I think the cloud has probably precipitated that as much as anything, because the speed at which this learning takes place with cloud technology has really accelerated it. So I read something last week, for example, from Andrew I never know how to pronounce his name. I shall go, but it's not correct. He used to work at Google and then over at Baidu, and he really does understand his AI. He was saying, for example, that as far as their experiments are concerned, speech recognition is now 99% accurate. And the last time I saw that stat, it was 96%, and that's within 6 months. So quite extraordinary development in terms of what AI is doing. And that's the key point. It is now ready to do business. So it's not going to fall short of expectation. It is ready for deployment. And here's a nice little example, just to give us an idea that, of what it can do. This is something, again, very recent, announced in the last week or so. And what's interesting is one of the roles that AI is going to play for us is that already it's been demonstrated that humans are not terribly good at evidence-based decision-making, funnily enough. We tend to rely on our gut a lot. And even in an area of expertise, a cardiologist is less likely to be accurate in diagnosis than AI already. So that is already beginning to scene set for us how we can imagine that AI can contribute to us. Now, does that reduce the need for a cardiologist? Does that get rid of it? Or does that simply mean that it becomes a tool for that person to become more effective? And I think that's the balance that we're going to see being played out for the foreseeable future. If you want to think about that a little bit more scientifically and figure out where humans exist and a combination of human and AI exists, then that's as good a chart as anything. And you might want to actually sit down with maybe your teams and think about that in the context of the customer service that you do, and ask yourself the question, when is it veering towards human, when is it veering towards an autonomous self-serve, and when do we need a blend of both? And I think that a lot of us will find that that middle ground is going to be the common ground in terms of what we're doing at the moment and how AI is going to gradually influence things. It has to be said, by the way, in terms of understanding where AI is at, that if you are hoping that your Siri and Cortana is going to become your best new friend anytime you can answer all questions that you have, you're probably going to be disappointed. What is true, though, is that we can build AI which is sitting in front of a very focused piece of knowledge. So in your context of running a contact center for a particular group of customers around a set of knowledge, it will work because that's a focused piece of knowledge. It's still very difficult for Siri, for example, to know everything about the universe and then also to be able to go out and do things as a result of that. Probably what Siri will do is to find you something and push you in front of the URL. But in terms of being able to execute a task around that, that's a much more difficult thing at this particular point in time. And the last sentence here is still vital, which is the context in which that knowledge sits is still relatively difficult for AI to get hold of stuff. But as we were saying earlier, what is interesting about AI is the speed at which it is changing. So say something today, it could well be negated within even a matter of months. It is going that fast. So in the near term, best predictive business systems are likely to deploy lots of layers of both human and machine, and there's going to be a relative opportunities in both camps. So again, if you're planning and thinking forward, you will undoubtedly be requiring live assistance in the foreseeable future, but some of the lower hanging fruit in terms of the less complicated work can undoubtedly be captured and delivered through some form of AI. And to that extent, people are getting it. So we're beginning to see now serious investment, and this is outside the contact center. This is a much broader conversation. In the same way that, 30 years ago, computers came to businesses and changed the way we do business, I think we're seeing a comparable thing here. Yeah, and everybody is going to be investing right the way across their activity in business to discover where AI adds some kind of value. Now, what's interesting here on this particular slide is that if you look at the various subdivisions of AI, it's interesting how many of those are applicable to our interests. So machine learning, which means that things get smarter over time, that is definitely something that adds value to a knowledge base. And a knowledge base is the basis upon which you can deliver self-serve. So tick in the box as far as that's concerned. Natural language processing, which is the ability of a machine to understand us saying something and tapping something and translating it into language that the machine understands, that's absolutely vital as an interface. An expert system, again, basically something that gets smarter over time, and particularly in our world where our resource planning is extremely challenging, and I don't think anybody's cracked omni-channel resource planning very well. I can definitely see AI coming in to help us think through some of that stuff. And then, of course, the business of vision. And if you look at there, the image recognition, it's interesting how much visual data is beginning to show up on social customer service, for example. And again, I can see applications for there. So the only thing I don't really buy at this point is robotics, probably, as being literally a little mini-me sitting next to me in a contact center. I think that's slightly less obvious, but many of those strands which go up to making the big picture called AI are going to be useful for our particular line of work. So, in a sentence, how should we think about this? Well, if we look at classic omni-channel design, there's two worlds. One is live, delivered through voice, text, and video, and then the other one is self-serve. Very roughly speaking, when things are tough emotionally, either positively or negatively, when things are complicated, or we want to build the relationship, then that remains the domain of human beings. Everything else, though, in terms of things like education, information, and getting stuff done, is very much the domain of self-service. And this is where probably is a massive opportunity across the life cycle that many organizations are going to be wanting to explore in that next 12 months. As an example, it won't necessarily translate into your universe, but it's interesting to note, it could also severely reduce the amount of low-level live engagement that you need. And this particular example is something I saw last year, actually, as it happens. Ticket Biz is a Spanish business. They provide a platform for the buying and selling of tickets. It's a very popular platform, but it's still one that's a little strange to the end customer. For example, you can see different price points for the same event. So if you're going to be buying, I don't know, an Adele ticket, for example, you might see it priced at, I don't know, 150 quid or 75 pounds or something for exactly the same seats. And that confuses people, so they phone in and say, why is that? And then you have to explain, well, it's because Ticket Biz isn't setting the price points, it's actually the sellers who are setting that price point. And that's not very complicated information, which again can be better delivered in an automated way. So they started now to automate some of that less complicated stuff, and they've seen a dramatic reduction in the amount of live chat. And in Ticket Business's case, it's extremely important because they're on a very, very fast growth curve to try to roll out that capability across all the other territories. And they were discovering that they were having to add headcount at the same time as at which they were growing. And so that's been a dramatic transformation. So anybody in the audience that is in a rapid startup business that is looking to scale, this is extremely important and interesting in terms of the evidence of what.
So in that slide, Martin, just the because you've got two parts on there. You've got live chat and you've got the search.
Yes.
Is it? I mean, it strikes me search is always the area where artificial intelligence comes in. Should you invest in putting artificial intelligence in the search or actually on the live chat afterwards?
Good question. No, the live chat didn't have any AI wrapped into it. All the intelligence was put into the live search. So again, it's got the simplicity and familiarity of Google, which is probably the par excellence example of AI in action. And what that does underneath of it, once you start to engage, is all sorts of clever stuff. So it starts to auto-suggest answers and throwing you up options from the knowledge base. It will also dynamically refer you to other articles if you need, and only after a whole number of proactive suggestions have been offered will it then offer to transfer you to live. But they're discovering with that in the majority of cases, i.e. the 80%, it's reduced the need to actually hand across to a human being, because the vast majority of questions are pretty simple. They've been captured in the knowledge base, and therefore things are resolved in that way.
Thank you.
So, AI and customer service. I think we can probably think about two major areas in which it's going to help us. On the left-hand side, I think there's a huge amount of things that's going to be happening in the background. And if you think about our world of customer service and contact centers particularly, the relationship between data that buzzes around and stuff that we manage to grab and use, I think the conversion there is very low. I'd say maybe 5% of everything we could get hold of we're actually using. Now, humans just ain't going to get into that stuff. We tend to use reports, MI, historic views of life. It's just not where it's at. So AI could very, very powerfully start to sit in the background, spotting patterns, spotting efficiencies at an operational level that we just don't notice, providing opportunities for coaching people, in fact, in terms of personal effectiveness, noticing things that we're not doing well, possibly in terms of service levels, dynamically pointing that out, allowing us to respond faster. And so what we're seeing really is somebody that's going to catch the ball for us and enable us to get closer to real-time responsiveness. And I think we're going to talk a little bit at the end there, actually, aren't we, about some of those opportunities sitting there. So that's one side of life, and I think in that sense, our work in contact centers hopefully starts to get smarter as opposed to just expecting us to work harder. That, I think, is the promise Tim was talking about earlier on, and I think that's increasingly over the next years, we're going to see that baked into any form of contact center solution. The other side of life is the one where the customer notices it, and it's provided across the life cycle, equally in sales, equally in service, to help customers get access to whatever they want. And also, by the way, to help improve the quality of that service knowledge. So we actually covered off that particular question earlier on, so we'll just keep going through and having a look. So just to make sure that we understand, it's software at the end of the day, as opposed to a three-dimensional opportunity. Did we do that poll earlier on or not?
No, we're going to do a poll now. What potential uptake from live assistants could intelligent assistants play in your contact center? The poll earlier was about whether people are planning to deploy. So do you think it's going to be between 0 and 9%? Do you think it's going to be between 10 and 19%, 20 to 29%, 30 to 49%, or 50% plus? So what potential uptake from live assistants could intelligence assistants play in your contact center? So let's have a look at the results here. The sample size for this is 134. And so the majority there are saying it's between 20 and 29% of the contact could be potentially taken up by intelligent assistants rather than live assistants. And interestingly, 14% of the audience think over half of, effectively half of contacts could be automated or assisted by an intelligence assistant. So
by the way, I think soon, once we've got over that particular statistic, it's going to be very interesting to try to understand how that varies by sector. Because I do think different sectors will have a different ratio, and the opportunities will be different as a result of that. But it's encouraging to see people recognizing that already.
Okay, so well, we've got some questions coming in thick and fast, actually. From the audience, so we'll have a look at what some of the questions is. Rishbar say, what exactly is the difference between the effect of automation in the call center and the effect of AI in the call center? Is artificial intelligence and automation the same, or is it different with respect to a contact center?
Well, I'll give it tuppence worth, and then Ashley, I'm sure. In reality, a lot of current self-service solutions are probably going to be run by rules-based as opposed to deep learning. And in that sense, there's a bit of a fusion and confusion that's taking place. If you are going to be purist about it and say that you need something like, a machine learning to qualify, then probably they still remain in the domain of the higher level and more expensive product sets, where things get smarter over time. Natural language processing, though, if you say that's part of AI, that's actually been around in IVRs for how long, actually?
An awfully long time. I think certainly in one form or another, easily sort of
10 years, 10, 15 years. Yeah. So again, not entirely new. So yes, there's a bit of a confusion, but AI pure, which is the more interesting part, I think is still earlier in terms of it making an impact in the centre.
Yeah, so I have a sneaking feeling a number of people are jumping on the bandwagon with artificial intelligence and are rebranding what we used to call software and now calling that artificial intelligence.
Well, artificial intelligence is software, so I don't think that distinction particularly helps. But I think the difference between rules-based as a way of making something automated as opposed to learning behaviorally what a pattern is, I think there's a distinction.
Yeah.
So Peter asks, will the new world mean more complex queries are automated, dumbing down the queries that agents handle?
Potentially, yes. I mean, again, a lot of this is going to be do with how much people want to invest in knowledge management and how smart. I mean, some of the things like Amelia, for example, learn as they go. That's a smart version of that.
Yeah. So if I can come in on that, so I think actually it's going to be sort of the opposite. That yes, artificial intelligence solutions will improve and be able to answer more and more complex questions. But at the same time, it's also going to be very empowering for an agent if done correctly, and also it is going to still push agents towards the more complex end and the more emotional responses that are needed. So I think there's always going to be space for the agent, and then if anything, it's going to be changing the way the agent works to make it a much more rewarding and complex job.
Well, let me give you an example of that. You may well find the small print in a claim is complex at the level of information. However, because it's basically telling you no, there's emotion. So AI may well give you that information. However, it needs to escalate to a live person because it suddenly becomes an emotional topic at the end of the day. So this is also to do with omni-channel design, understanding when it's right to introduce humans back into a conversation. And again, this is going to be a new skill that we're going to have to get good at.
We've had a question from Ulrich who said, is speech readiness available in anything other than English?
So it is available in a lot of different languages. I think it does suffer because it tends to be that English tends to get a lot of the research first and a lot of the focus. So it depends very much where the research money goes. But for instance, there's an awful lot of research these days going into Chinese, and Chinese is probably on par with English. It is probably fair to say that other languages that are less widely used probably do lag a bit, but it is improving all the time as there are new techniques, new ways of learning new languages and applying techniques that are learned in one place to another.
It's likely to change. I was geeking out, by the way, last week on this very topic, and apparently the base reference voice recordings that people use for tuning up things like Siri still remain predominantly English, and people have recognized that we need to build more variety into that. And there's some primary research going on at that area, which will then become available to people. So I think we'll begin to see over the next 2 or 3 years, new languages coming in. However, in terms of text-based engagement, all the major languages in the world are pretty much well represented.
Well, we've got a question for Tim here. Michael says, is there a tipping point in customer cohort, i.e. baby boomer versus generation Y in terms of adoption? I know, Tim, you've looked at different generations in take-up of technology.
Yes, we have. I think I mean, it's very interesting, the whole kind of generational aspect of how people want to use technology. And I suspect that the current generation, the kind of the new learners, will be much more ready to accept AI technology. Will be much more familiar with its use and how to get the best out of it. So I think it is a generational thing. Although, from our job is to make it readily available to everybody. Right? That's what we're after. Is we're after a solution that helps all generations to get to the answer of their questions more quickly.
I tell you what's interesting. I think the advent of voice-based automation in the form of Siri has also opened up an opportunity for the people who were always more familiar with voice as a way of engaging with brands. And I know from some of the examples that Alexa has provided, they're targeted at providing therapeutic help in healthcare for the older generation, and the uptake there has been popular. So I think if you're going to stereotype people and say that possibly there's a generation more addicted to text-based engagement, smartphone, and then you've also got an audience that is more comfortable with voice, I think you've got a pretty broad spectrum of people that are covered.
I know we've got an interesting final question this session from Michael. And he's saying, where is the handoff from artificial intelligence or bots to an agent? Is anyone looking at that impact, not just in terms of process, but also brand, the role of an agent, competence of the agent, capture of the conversation in the CRM, etc.? Michael says, it feels like a technology race without a whole understanding of the impact of implementing it.
Well, you're dead right. If you buy this tech and just turn it on tomorrow, you're in trouble, I would argue. You need to understand your customer journeys and how it all rolls together. At the technology level, if you have done something like, I don't know, 3/4 of the way through doing something like booking a hotel room, and then you need to speak to somebody for whatever reason, it's clearly not going to work to then go back to the start of that conversation if you then escalate to a human being. And all the systems I've seen and aware of will have dynamically painted on the advisor screen where you've got to in that process, so the human being can pick up from that point. And indeed, if it works the other way around, which is I've started with a human being and I complete a process in an automated way, both ways of doing that have got to be seamless, otherwise this technology isn't going to be adopted. But at the technical level, that's all enabled. Taking the broader thing, though, about when and how you should use it, you need to spend some time thinking about what matters to the customer and thinking about how those journeys work.
Ashley, you've got a big smile on your face there, as if you've got some little bit of insight that only you know.
Unfortunately not. I'm just thinking it is actually a very hard problem, and it's something that we're investigating how to solve this easily, because it is very, very, very important to have that very sort of seamless handover with the full context, and it's something we've always felt passionately of outside of artificial intelligence. Whenever you hand off a conversation between different agents, you need to pass that information, and it's something we need to work out the best way of actually doing that. Now you've got partly intelligent assistant and partly a human involved in that conversation.
Yeah.
I would say
on live chat, I played the Guess the Robot game, which is, am I talking to a robot or to a person? And I've got to say, it's still fairly easy to spot these days.
Yeah, and I don't think that matters. I don't think the role is to try to fool people that it's a real human. I don't think that's where the opportunity sits. Right.
So do you want to carry on with looking at customer service applications?
So in terms of the customer service side, which in fact both customer and advisor can see, the software is either doing the job entirely, substitution, or it's doing it together with the person, augments it. Crucially important, we're now at a point where we can understand someone's intent and context, and therefore it feels like we're dealing with something that's smart, and that works, and that's very, very important. It can do two things. It can deliver us information, or it can also be organized to go and do something. So in other words, it can complete a piece of workflow for us. If it's using machine to machine or deep learning, then it gets smarter over time. And I think the thing that has again been critical is that it allows us to engage either in voice or text format in a natural way. That again has made it incredibly popular for our receptivity. In terms of where we're at, it's a journey, but you'll notice even on this particular slide, which is now in fact 18 months old, we're beyond just static FAQ knowledge base. We are able already to be able to dip into large amounts of data, unstructured data, make sense of that, and operate increasingly in a real-time context. Probably things like location-based service we can do as far as that's concerned. But there's still a journey to be made, as you can see. But already there's some value to be had as far as that definition is concerned. I think one of the most important things with it is that it becomes a single point of access. These are 4 examples which are all worth briefly having a look at. The one on the left-hand side with the yellow hair is called Frank, an Australian and New Zealand type business there, which is dealing with an interesting opportunity. If you wanted to swap a bank or you wanted to swap out from a current utility company, Frank will go and do that for you. It's already been proven in Australia, and they will disengage you with your permission from a certain supplier and engage you with a better quality or value supplier. So that's been very popular. HipMonk, again, just to make the point that it's often an interesting and sensible thing to provide a whole number of different knowledge bases in a common format. So HipMonk, not so popular over here, but very popular in the States, provides travel and flight and hotel, because that's all part of the business of travel overall, if you want. The next one with Verizon is interesting because clearly we're dealing with personal information here, money and bills, and so quite often to extend the value of self-service, you need a form of identification and verification, and often for simplicity, this is where biometrics is becoming more and more popular. And then if any of you are about to visit a Radisson hotel in the near future, probably the closest one here is up at Heathrow, you will come across Edward. And Edward is a new way of getting what you need in the hotel. So if you want to know where the gym is, getting some extra shampoo, getting a meal sent up, you don't phone any longer, you just tap Edward and Edward gets to answer you and provides both those answers, but sometimes a routing service to the front desk as well. So the key point is it does provide you with a single point of access to all of those back-end data sources and Teams for that matter. Comes in 3 flavors or multiple flavors. It can either be text-based, which is fine, or voice-based, or indeed it can look like something. It could be an avatar, and part of your design process is decide which is most appropriate. I thought I'd just dip into that last one because Amelia has got some attention last year and is being used at Enfield Council, interestingly, for potentially quite complicated things like self-certification for planning, authenticating applications for permits and licenses. And I think if I was going to say anything about where best practice is likely to come through, I'd be tempted to keep a lookout with local and central government, who, as we all know, are finding it tough to fund, you know, lots of headcount, and they are probably going to be more radical than some other sectors in terms of using this technology. So already take a look at Enfield in terms of what they're trying to do there. Again, in the future, it's not common yet, but you can see here that providing variety is going to be popular, and that's called multimodal. So you can see just at the top on the right-hand page there, say it, tap it, or type it, again giving customers the option to be able to do that. And this was actually a use case by a US bank discovering to what degree people were prepared to talk into their smartphone to do things like swapping money between accounts and doing various activities like that. And actually it was a very successful deployment as it happens. Where are we in terms of this marketplace? Well, at the moment we're worth just a little bit over $1 billion. We're probably going to be worth over about $5 billion relatively soon, in the next 3 or so years. And there's about 1,200 companies out there with about 2,700 virtual advisors in one form or the other offering this kind of service. So that gives you a sense of where we are. So we're beyond early adoption We're just getting into the next phase of the marketplace. And then actually, from my perspective, it depends how you look at it, but the potential it has in our space is considerable. All the stats you can just see on the left-hand side are taken from existing use cases. These are not vendors talking stuff up. These are actual people who've deployed it over the last 3 or 4 years. So this is even not the latest generation of the technology. And I think what's interesting here is if you look on the right-hand side of the page, it raises a very interesting discussion, and that is what's the shape going to be in the future between doing live, self-service and proactive. I think AI is contributing in 2 areas. One, the amount of self-service, and then talking about the blended version, how self-service and assistant service is going to work together. But also notice it's actually expanded proactive. And again, I think that's very characteristic of what those customers expect from us these days, trying to anticipate stuff before we know it. And again, AI sitting in the background helping us to do that. So that takes us to our, have we done that one now?
We've done this one, yeah.
We have done that one. Okay, so let's move on. So a couple of points to be made here. Because the movement between self-service and live is going to be pretty much continuous, things we've got to do is to make it easy to do. And I would suggest that anybody that, whilst it's tempting to go, I can reduce 25% of my headcount, think what that does to my budget, don't think in those terms, because otherwise we'll do the classic mistake of never having telephone numbers on websites because it was a cheaper option, a cheaper channel. The fact of the matter is, even when self-service works, you don't know when an individual wants live assistance. So bake that into your interfaces and make that as you can do. That's first design principle. The second thing is, and this is actually Atom Bank. You may have seen this presented by Michael Sherwood, but he shared this a couple of times over now. And this is an interesting example. If you look at the left-hand side screen here, you know, we have to have a wait time of 10 minutes before we've got anybody available on chat, as it happens. And so the way they've designed their customer experience is to say, well, I am available, I'm a virtual assistant. Would you like me to help you meantime? And again, it giving the customer choice as far as that's concerned. Very good, good stuff there. Here's again further examples about how we need to start thinking about our service design. Left-hand side is an easy thing. What time does the shuttle leave for the airport? Every 20 minutes. What time is breakfast? Da 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 da. Solid knowledge, doesn't need a human being, doesn't add anything to get a human being involved. That's entirely delivered in that particular format, that conversational style. The next one, though, along human assistance, is a situation where suddenly the customer says, do you actually happen to have something? In this case, an iPhone 6 charger. Now, that's not going to be sitting in your knowledge base in that sense. That's much more circumstantial data, in which case that we recognize that's outside of our domain of capability, the Ivy system, and it therefore escalates that. And Josh at the front desk steps in.
Wanted to go back to just before this slide,
Martin. The sound is back on now.
Ah, okay, sorry, what point did we get cut off there?
Just on that slide there.
On that slide, okay, no problem. So this particular slide gives a number of examples about when we want to blend human and self-service together. So if we look at the left-hand example to begin with, very simple. It's 2 questions. When's the shuttle go? When is breakfast? This is easily encoded knowledge. You don't need a human being. It can be entirely delivered through self-service. The other 2 examples, though, do require escalation to a human. In the first example, there's a question coming from a customer saying, have you got an iPhone 6 charger? You know, that's not something you're going to hold in a knowledge base. Therefore, there's a seamless escalation to the front desk, they step in immediately. And then the last example we can see here is where the topic becomes emotional because we've failed to deliver service. As it happens, Wi-Fi in the hotel, very irritating, and therefore the customer is likely to be upset. You could automate that, but you miss the point in terms of the human dimension of the experience, so therefore there's an escalation there in terms of the manager will reach out to you, personally apologize, and hopefully fix that particular problem. So it gives you an example in service design of when we can, when we need to blend those two worlds together. Here's another example, again, of using AI proactively in the sales process, where early on we are establishing interest from customers, and in this particular capability, it's using email for B2B customers, bouncing back until we get to a point of knowing this is a customer who probably typically has got a budget, a need, whatever we want to define, and at that particular point, we will then send them through to a live salesperson at the end of the day. So that's how they're using it as far as that's concerned. So that was really a set of examples for us in terms of allowing the customer to self-serve and sometimes being involved in that escalation live. As I said earlier on, there's a huge opportunity though sitting behind the scenes where again AI can make our whole world that much smarter. And I thought that we would pause a little bit and try to persuade Ashley to drop a few hints here in terms of what he's plotting without giving away too many clues here. But I do think that, again, there's huge opportunity to try to transform that operational data, which is really hard. And this is a topic I'm passionate about. I mean, at the moment, performance and policy in particular, you've got to sit with a headphone, haven't you? Yeah. You've got to try and find something that is relevant to the person, sit them down and try to pretend that 1 out of thousands is meaningful and whatever. And there has to be a better way.
Oh, absolutely.
And I thought it would be interesting for us to explore a little bit about what AI might be able to contribute in that respect.
Yes, so I think it's something that we think is a very hot topic. So it's very difficult. You can only, at the moment, you can only spend the time to pick that 1 in 1,000 out, and you have to really sort of get lucky to say, is this a relevant call? Is this something I really should be listening to, reviewing, and looking at? Yes. So there are multiple things there. We can be trying to make sure that we can actually try and do some initial sifting to sort of say, okay, well, these, rather than take it to 1 out of 1,000, let's take it to 1 out of 100 or 1 out of 50 calls that we think we should be actually reviewing and looking at and trying to guide that. And then really to the longer term goal there is to be able to make that a lot more automated. And as we learn and as we apply machine learning, we can get better and better at that and start to be giving, the machine could be giving its own feedback and own directions. Mm-hmm. So the idea being that it can be almost, well, maybe not quite, but almost some self-service for the agent, where they're getting that coaching, that feedback from the machine, bringing up the quality and bringing down training time. So
because looking at that simply, I mean, deep learning in a sentence is looking for patterns, isn't it? Yeah. So presumably we can say a certain outcome has a pattern to it, which would be best practice. And then we can compare that against where I'm actually at. And therefore it can learn about my behavior, my development. And I guess this could get packaged up as dashboards eventually.
So there's 2 elements to that. So there's the stuff that you can use to feedback to the individual. But there's also very important, as you're saying earlier on, to get the insights about what's happening to your business, because there's stacks of information that's currently just going to waste. There's an awful lot of insight and a lot of knowledge there that your customers are telling you, that's going through to your customers about what's working well, what isn't, what products do they like, what are your competition doing, that at the moment you can't see. You can't see, you're losing it. So.
Now, interesting. So I'm a bit of a fan of speech analytics, for example, and I know you've been working on that. Does AI sit in the background of some of that again and help surface some of the...
Yes, I know sort of one sort of very good anecdote of that recently, sort of that I know Sky have been sort of using some very sort of similar technology to analyse what's going on with their customer communications. And the anecdote there is because VA can be very much used to pull out sort of themes, common sort of knowledge there.
Yes.
And Sky didn't know they were seeing some extra load into their contact centre. They didn't know what was driving this. And they tried various things. When they applied an AI solution to this to pick out the themes of these conversations, and very quickly they realised that the common theme coming up was that the text was too big on the menus, and I was thinking, what does this mean? And then very quickly realised, oh yes, we just rolled out a new update to our set-top boxes. That actually, if you display them on a standard TV, not a HD TV, you can't read all the text. And this is that then they can work out that problem and solve it. And this was a good example of where actually speech analytics and AI helped them to find that. They weren't getting them. The customers were telling them.
Getting that early rather than later in the years.
But they didn't have that insight. They weren't having.
So that's a brilliant example. I mean, that translates into all sorts of things, like the time it takes you to discover stuff, the additional impact that has on NPS or however you measure customer satisfaction, the extra cost to deal with the load of customers still coming in, chasing down the problem. There's massive sets of benefits sitting in there, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely.
At the end of the day. And I think if there's been a criticism of us in the contact center world is that we're not quite as quick and as nimble as online. And I rather suspect this is going to make the contact center much more real time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's it. Absolutely. So it's very much key to get that sort of feedback and get that quick insight so you can react to them. You can solve these things. I mean, traditionally it is much more difficult than coping with online data, because it is a lot more unstructured, and there's a lot more things you would capture as maybe some speech or unstructured text, but it's there.
What's it going to do to the, because you're not going to be no different from any other provider at the moment with your MI suite, what are you classically going to do in terms of the traditional MI, behind the curve, rear view mirror, versus surfacing stuff in the now? What's that going to do?
So I think I think that to us, one of the big promises of AI is to find out the things that you don't know. Traditional sort of MI suites and so on are very much focused around data that you expect to be there or measures that you know about.
Perfect.
And you can see those things. What is more difficult is the insights of things that you're not necessarily looking for directly or not measuring directly. Where AI can really sort of
do that.
help you.
And there's one last area just before Jonty's going to steam him, I'm sure. On the routing, I've always been a big fan of the added value that you put into routing, the intelligence. Is this going to take us to the next level of what intelligent routing means?
Yes, absolutely. Because I think there's sort of two sides to that. Because one, intelligent routing needs something to fuel it. It needs that data. So traditionally, that's been done by data that's captured in CRM systems or in other external data sources. AI can sort of help us gather a lot more data to pick up a lot more insights about previous interactions, previous conversation histories, additional sort of data sources that we can bring out from public interactions people are having with social media and so on. So it can provide more fuel for the engine, and at the same time it can also help to make a more efficient, a better engine, by applying, rather than having some simple rules to drive the actual routing. As we say, AI helps you actually create those rules and think of those rules.
I had a deja vu. Do you remember us talking about scalable intimacy about 3 years ago?
Yes, a few years ago.
It sounds like we might be getting close to that.
We're getting close to that.
Yeah. Interesting.
Well, I think, as Ashley says, you're in real time pulling on multiple data sources that it would be practically and that gives you that intelligence to be able to say, the routing aspect of it becomes much more real time and intelligent at that point.
Yes. Jonty, have we got any more questions that we could just spend a bit more time listening to?
We have lots and lots of questions indeed, so I'll just show these to you now. And the first question we have is from James45. What role can artificial intelligence play in proactive selling? Predictive dialers and the like have been around for some time, but I'm interested to understand the next generation of systems. I sort of read an interesting article the other day. It said the average salesperson gives up with a prospective customer after 2 attempts, where I guess a bot could, rather than giving up, could just wait for another 6 months.
Well, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. And indeed, I was reading something about marketing leads often are given up by salespeople too early. They just need a bit more nurture for longer.
Yes.
And again, if you imagine AI sitting in the background, making slightly more longer term views about status and situations and helping us to sift out what remains relevant. I can see that.
Yeah, so I think so. So certainly, I think a lot of these things are just becoming available now. So there's you can be using sort of techniques to first off to prioritise the actual leads you have. So using sort of things like lead scoring and AI techniques there to say, okay, well these actually, I think you should be looking at these leads first because we think they're much more likely to convert. And it's interesting you pointed out the people giving up too early. I mean, that's one of the things we've been looking at analysis of depending on the particular lead, when should you give up and how many attempts should you actually be making on this type of lead? To actually, again, sort of apply AI to that. As you said, 2 years, too few.
Actually did some work on that internally for us, and we found that we were giving up too soon. So really? He's cracked the whip and made us
persist. Okay, that's first.
Thomas has got a good tip here. So much of what you do with artificial intelligence is based on the data it's fed. Therefore, making sure AI can access the right data is paramount to those looking to implement AI soon. Also, if customer conversation and transaction data is part of that, getting historical data is benefit as well. The more data is better problem solving. And I guess if you're looking to automate queries, then a good knowledge base, I would imagine, is almost a prerequisite, actually.
Yeah, so with all these things, a lot of it depends on the quality of the data you have to feed in. So having a lot of these prerequisites, like a knowledge base that's in good condition or a good history of conversations and so on, is very key. And also being able to tie that into other data you've got, so taking maybe your conversations, but being able to tie that into data from your CRM system, so you've got the outcomes of those conversations and so on, is very, very important.
Tim, I don't know if you've got any market research. Brian asks, there's a lot of talk about the obvious advantages of AI within a modern contact center, but has there been much market research on whether customers have a say in this, whether they would prefer, sure, for out of hour when the chance is nothing or a robot, but do customers expect that?
Yeah, there's a ton of research that was done last year on user acceptance on chatbots. If anybody wants that, it's been done by a UK business, which actually is very favourable in terms of people's uptake. Alexa, as in Amazon, has done a lot of work over voice and its acceptance. So yes, there is data out there that you can get hold of. And in fact, you probably saw, I didn't refer to it, but there was a Daily Telegraph poll after Amelia turned up, and let's not stereotype things entirely, but there is a certain type of person that reads the Daily Telegraph, and 42% of that audience said they'd be up for engaging with artificial intelligence. So, game on.
Very good. Interesting opinion from Charlie. Says, I think it's interesting about how AI can be more involved in the self-service side rather than muscling in on the contact center. So quite an interesting opinion there. Carmen has said, I can see AI making a huge positive impact on quality assurance, not only for quality purposes, but equally important to collect massive amounts of unknown data to help take the business forward. Ashley, I think that was the point you were making there. And Michael has also said, as a tip, offer some automated content to push regularly. This will allow you to re-engage the user rather than waiting for the user to integrate with the bot. That's quite an interesting one. And Ulrich asked a question, the last question of the session. To what extent is AI already used to preempt issues and improve the primary process rather than avoiding or helping to fix issues afterwards?
Brilliant. I don't think I've seen that in action, but if you take what Ashley's been discussing, the process of looking for patterns, and if that's working all the time in the background, that ought to be sitting under your proactive strategy. And people ought to be spotting things that you can eradicate or minimize because you're able to see them for the first time. And I've got to imagine that capability is going to be brought to market because, stop doing dumb things to customers has been a great tagline for many years, but pretty difficult to execute on. And it's no coincidence that Amazon, very good at this, has been a massive user of this kind of approach for years.
Well, we've reached the top of the hour, so I'm afraid that's all we've got time for now. If in 1 or 2 words you could type in what did you like best about this webinar, and you'll actually find there's a human interaction reading all of these and reporting these back to the panelists. Just today's winning tip, ta-da, who wins this nice bottle of champagne or a box of chocolates, which is Thomas's point about making sure that you've got all of the data feeds and the right data. If you want to watch a replay, there's a lot of data here, or if you want to share this with your management teams, give them an idea of what's coming through, that will be available probably within about half an hour at callcenterhelper.com/recorded webinars. Tomorrow's conference continues. Performance Management Tools kicks off at 10:30. So just like to thank our speakers. Thank you to Martin Hill-Wilson from Brain Food Consulting.
My pleasure.
Thank you to Ashley Unit from New Voice Media.
Thank you.
And also to Tim Pickard, also from New Voice Media.
Thanks, Jonty.
Thanks very much.